we'll be moving on to another part of chemical control. We are discussing about integrated pest management. We have discussed several non-chemical management options, and today and tomorrow we will be discussing in detail about a group of chemicals which are widely used in storage pest management, that is fumigants. So today, first we will see what are the different kinds of fumigation, and later on we will see what are the different kinds of fumigations. We will have to continue tomorrow also to finish off this portion. So any fumigant, I will share that my slide. Any fumigant is a chemical which can be either be solid or liquid, but if you keep it at room temperature, it will become volatile. That means it converted into gaseous form. Actually, a fumigant is a solid or liquid. Sometimes certain gases are also used, but normally it is available as solids or liquids. But at room temperature, it will convert it into gaseous form, and that gaseous form is extremely toxic to insects. So that is nothing but a fumigant. So this property is used for managing storage space. So if you see, there are one or two definitions of fumigants. Just I told you, chemicals either liquid or solid, volatile at room temperature. Volatile means it will get converted in the gaseous phase, and it is poisonous in nature. That is nothing but a fumigant. Another definition is chemical which at a required temperature and pressure can exist in gaseous state in sufficient concentration to be lethal to a given pest organism. The same thing at room temperature, it will should convert into gaseous form, and it should be toxic. It's not only used for managing insects, it is also used for managing pathogens, including fungi, soil fungi. Those who are from pathology, you may have studied about fumigation of soil. So, to ward off soil pathogens. So, it is used in management of diseases, management of insects, nematodes, rodents, etc. So, almost all the fumigants, one inherent property of a fumigant is it is toxic to almost all organisms, not only to insects. That is one thing with respect to fumigants, and all of them are respiratory poisons. That means it is inhaled through the respiratory tract and will act on the respiratory system. Another typical feature with the fumigant is it is generally non-persistent. That means it is gaseous in nature. So once you keep a fumigant outside, it will get dissolved into the environment pretty quickly. So whenever we are going for a fumigate, it has to be in a confined space. If it is if you are keeping it in outside, say in an open space, it won't have any effect. It will evaporate. It will it will convert into a gaseous form. Once it is in the gaseous form, it will mix with the atmospheric gas. It is lost. So that is one typical feature of fumigant, that is it is non-persist, it doesn't persist at all. There are certain fumigants which slightly persist depending upon the material which we try to fumigate. Otherwise, once you release it into the atmosphere, it is non-persistent. It's not like insecticides which you spray on crop. It remains persistent. But fumigants are not, because it is gaseous in nature, because of its gaseous property only, it is non-persistent. Once you just like a hydrogen balloon, if you hold it tightly, yes, it remains there, but once you release it, it moves up into the same manner. If we are releasing the fumigant in a covered environment, in a secured environment, it will remain there. But once you open up that environment, it will escape into the atmosphere. So it is non-persistent. So that is a few characters. If you see one of the few basic characters a fumigant should possess, it should get converted into gaseous phase at room temperature. It should be toxic. It is non-persistent, and all of them are respiratory poisons. So these are the basic characters. Individual characters we will see later. And what are the characteristics of an ideal fumigant? There is no fumigant which can be termed as an ideal fumigant. But what should be the characters that a fumigant should possess? And that characteristic, one thing is, it should be extremely volatile with deep penetration power. That means if the volatility or the conversion of that solid or liquid fumigant into gaseous phase is not that proper, that means it doesn't get converted into gaseous phase so easily, it's not that volatile, then that is not an ideal thing. It should get instantaneously converted into gaseous phase. It should be extremely volatile. That is one thing. And it should have deep penetrating power. See, one thing you can imagine, if the fumigant, the converted gaseous fumigant, if heavier than air, it will always remain. And if you are releasing in a covered godown, a small room which is made it airtight, we are releasing that fumigant. If it is the fumigant is so it will not reach the bag any purpose for those bags which are kept at the top layers. In some cases, there are certain fumigants which are layer of bags. So it should be, we should ensure that the gas distributes evenly, should have deep penetrating power. We may be, and you have seen silos and all, wherein each silo is having 25,000, 35,000 tons of capacity. So if you are releasing a fumigant, that fumigant should penetrate deep into the silo. Then only the entire grain will get fumigated. If we have a fumigant which is very heavier than air, then it will fumigate only the base part of the silo. If it is extremely lighter than air, it will fumigate only the top part of the silo. So it won't be of any use. So whatever the fumigant, it should be volatile. It should have very good penetrating power, and it should be toxic to all stages of the insect pest. That means that most of the fumigants possess that character. It is toxic to insect pest, and almost all stages. There is no state specificity. Just like insecticides, sometimes certain insecticides are effective against larval stages. It won't be effective against adult stages. So there are insecticides like that which are used in the field. But in storage, whatever fumigant we use, it is toxic to almost all stages of insects. So that's a character possessed by almost all the insects, and it should distribute uniformly. That's what I told. It should distribute uniformly. It should have deep penetrating power, and it should have uniform distribution property. Otherwise, if it doesn't distribute uniformly, the fumigation won't be thorough. So that is the third character. And it should not react with food products. Whatever grain or oil seed or whatever commodity we fumigate, the fumigant should not react with that commodity. If it reacts with that commodity, that's not an ideal character. If it reacts with that commodity, it will get converted into some other toxic form. So we should try to select a fumigant which doesn't react with in the commodity which we which we are fumigating. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind. It should not be reactive to reacting with the food products. And the second thing is it is the less toxic to plants and mammals. So most of the fumigants doesn't possess that property. If it is toxic to insect, it is toxic to mammals also. Maybe it may or may not be toxic to plants. Certain fumigants are non-toxic to plants, still they are toxic to insects. But fumigants which are toxic to insect are always almost toxic to mammals also, other organisms also. So that character also most of the fumigants doesn't possess. At least absorption and high diffusion. That means the fumigant which is released into a grain, the grain should not absorb that fumigant. If the grain absorbs that fumigant, that means that the residue of fumigant will remain in that grain while consumption. So an ideal fumigant should not get absorbed onto the fumigated commodity. If it gets absorbed, then the residue problem will arise. So least absorption and high diffusion. High diffusion power is related to the distribution property, then also penetration power. If it is having very good penetration power and very good uniform distribution, that means it is having very diffusing property. If it is not not that having that diffusion property, then it will not distribute evenly. So all those three things: penetration, distribution, and diffusion, all are interlinked. And next thing is it should have distinct warning order. Why? Because as I told you earlier, almost all the fumigants which are toxic to insects are toxic to human beings also. So any person who accidentally enters into a fumigated room should get instantaneous warning that this room is fumigated. So almost all the fumigants should have a warning mode. Otherwise, there can be accidents because if it's in a gaseous form, nobody can see whether it is fumigated or not. So if a room is fumigated, if one person accidentally enters into it, it should instantaneously warn about the presence of fumigant. So a warning order should be there. We will see when we discuss about fumigants how this warning property is there. We will see. Then easy to handle and transport. That is one thing. That is one of the reason why aluminum phosphate is uh, commonly used. It is pretty easy to handle and transport. Then it should not leave any harmful residue that it all. It should not get absorbed into the commodity. If it is get absorbed, it will be harmful. It will leave residue. Then it should be non-explosive. Certain fumigants, what happens is that if it gets converted into the gaseous form from liquid or solid form, at that time it may catch fire, it may explode. So the certain fumigants have that property. So whatever fumigants which we are using, it should be non-inflammable. It should be non-explosive. There are certain fumigants which have that character. It should not be corrosive. That means certain fumigants, though it doesn't react with any food commodity, it may react with the containers. Some fumigants react with aluminum, some react with iron, etc. So if it has that property, say if one fumigant is reacting with aluminum or iron, then aluminum and iron starts corroding. So if you are constructing a silo with iron, and if you are trying to fumigate it with a fumigant which is corroding iron, then the silo doesn't last long. So that's why whatever fumigant that we use, it should be non-corrosive. For seed technology students, whatever fumigant we should use, it should not destroy the viability or germination of the seeds. For grains, it's not an issue. For seeds, it should not affect the viability of seeds. It should not possess any consumer hazards that is related to residue. It should not leave any residue. Easily and cheaply available, that is one thing. Then any known antidotes, because if any adverse thing happen, we should know the antidote. That means the person can be treated easily. So that is another feature that the fumigant should possess. It should have non-antidote, should be least soluble in water. That is the one reason is, if it is soluble in water means every grain contains water, every plant material. So if it gets absorbed into water, then residue will remain in that grain. So it should be least absorptive to water, also to oils and all. We will discuss that later. And it should be chemically stable. Then only it will act. If it is not unstable, then it won't work. So these are the characters. Several of this we will discuss it again and again once we discuss it with the individual fumigants. So these are the characteristics of an ideal fumigant. As I told you, most of the fumigants doesn't process all those characters, but we select those fumigants which has the most ideal characters. Even though it has one or two adverse characters, we ignore it and use it because we don't have a fumigant which possesses all these characters. So that is one thing. Then undesirable character. Though there are several, whatever the opposite it is can be considered as undesirable, but certain things which we have not discussed earlier, that we will discuss it over. More exposure period. That means there are certain fumigants. Say we will take the example of two fumigants which are widely used. One is methyl bromide. Methyl bromide, it is effective if we expose the grain to methyl bromide for a period of 2 to 3 days. It will kill almost all the insects. But for the case of aluminum phosphate, 7 days for the same effect. So that means the exposure period for phosphine is, or aluminum phosphide is, far greater than methyl bromide. So that's why methyl bromide is a preferred fumigant compared to aluminum phosphide. So that we have to keep in mind. It should have more exposure period. If we have less, any ideal fumigant should have less exposure period and resistance development. Aluminum phosphide. Another drawback for aluminum phosphide is that it is the insects are quickly developing resistant to aluminum phosphide. So resistance development is a major problem. So if the insect develop resistance, that fumigant is of no use. So insect just like insecticides, if insect develop resistance to fumigants also. So that is one undesirable character, and corrosiveness that we have discussed earlier. Then coming to the calculation of the dose of a fumigant, how we calculate the dose of a fumigant. The dose of a fumigant is fixed based on the parameter concentration and exposure period. The product of that means if we multiply concentration and exposure period, we will get a value, and that value is constant for a particular fumigant. We call it a CT value, concentration into time. That is a constant for each and every fumigant. I will show you, explain it with a table. Here, see the CT value. CT value, C into T product. CT value for methyl bromide is constant. It is 166. It won't change. But see it over here. Here we have the highest concentration of 83 milligram per liter. This 83 milligram at this highest concentration of 83 milligram per liter, we need to expose the grain with methyl bromide for only for 2 hours. It will cause mortality of the insect. 83 into 2, it is 166. So if it try to decrease the concentration from 83 to 55.3, then we have to increase the exposure period. 55.3 into 3, we will get the CT value as 166. Take the case of lowest concentration, 16.6 milligram per liter. We have to increase the exposure period to 10 hours. Again, the CT value is 166. So one thing we have to understand is the CT value or the concentration into time value is constant for each and every fumigant. If you are using extremely high concentration, exposure period can be decreased. If you are reducing the concentration, then exposure time can be increased. So this is CT value, or for the concept of CT value, concentration into time value for fumigants. Are you clear with the CT value? Yes, okay. So the recommendation of fumigant is the quantity of the fumigant and the time required for the fumigation. So the concentration as well as the time. So the product of the concentration and the exposure period gives the CT value. And that CT value is constant for a particular fumigant. So we can alter either the concentration or the time to arrive at a particular CT value. So if we are increasing the concentration, then we can reduce the time. If we are reducing the concentration, increase the exposure period so that it reaches the required CT value for that particular fumigant. So that is one thing you have to keep in mind. Now comes the different kinds of or different methods of fumigation. There are different methods of fumigation. It's not that difficult to understand. It is very easy to understand. We will be discussing about 5 methods. The last one we will deal it at the end. The first 4 we will deal it with now. The last one we will deal it at the end, because in modified atmosphere we are not at all using any chemicals. So that's why I will be dealing with it later. So the different kinds of fumigation. One is space fumigation at atmospheric pressure. The second one is fumigation under sheet or cover. Then fumigation of portable tents or vacuum fumigation. Modified atmosphere will deal it later. Coming to it one by one, space fumigation at atmospheric pressure. So here, what you can imagine is if you want to fumigate a room or a godown. So imagine I want to fumigate this room. I have a few bags of rice kept in this room, and I want to fumigate this room. What first thing I will do is I close all the windows, doors, everything, ventilators, everything. I will seal it properly. All the windows, the ventilators, doors, etc. I will seal it. I will measure the volume of the room, and I calculate the dose of the fumigant based on the volume of the room, not based on the number of bags of grains I have kept or the weight of the grains I have kept, because I am fumigating the entire room. So I calculate the volume of measure the volume of the room, calculate the quantity of the fumigant based on the volume of the room, then I fumigate. That means the entire room is fumigated, not the grain alone. So that is space fumigation. Entire space is fumigation. So that is what we are discussing it here. The entire area of godown is treated. All hidden insects will be killed. That is one advantage. Whatever grains whatever insects which are hiding in any part of the room, any part of the godown, it will get killed by space fumigation. That is one advantage of it. And we calculate the dose according to the volume of the stew. That is what I told. I measure the volume of the room and calculate the dose. But one thing is, even though I have only 10 bags or 20 bags of grain, uh, I need a huge volume of a huge quantity of fumigant to fumigate the room, because I am fumigating the entire room or godown. So the quantity of fumigant required will be high in this kind of fumigation, because entire space is fumigated, and the success of this fumigation depends on airtightness. That's what I told. The first thing I should do is I should seal all the windows, doors thoroughly, ventilators, because the room should be airtight. If the room is not airtight, fumigation won't be effective. So airtightness is one critical criteria. Everything should be sealed with high density polyethylene of 1000 gauge, and the joints also should be sealed. Next, fumigation under sheet or cover. I will take the same example. In this room, I have 10 bags of grains. Limitation for fumigant. What I do is I fumigate only the 10 bags of grain, not the entire room. What I will do is I will cover the bags of grain with a polythene sheet, thick polythene sheet without any openings to this polythene sheet. I will completely cover the grain, and I will release fumigant under the sheet. The fumigant will be released under the sheet. Here, the dose will be calculated based on the quantity of the grain stored, not on the volume. That is one thing difference. In space fumigation, we are fumigating the entire room. In fumigation under sheet or cover, we are fumigating the grain, only the grain. We will be covering it to make it airtight. That's the only thing. So the dose will be calculated based on the quantity of the grain which we are fumigating. So that is the difference between space fumigation and fumigation under sheet or cover. It will give better result than space fumigation because we are targeting it. Instead of fumigating the entire room, we are fumigating that particular grain which we intend to fumigate. So it is a bit of targeted kind of fumigation. So it gives better results. Stacks are covered with bags are covered with gas proof sheet, and all the joints will be properly sealed, and the dose is calculated based on the quantity of the material. That means the quantity of the grain which we are fumigating. Are you clear with the difference between vacuum space fumigation and fumigation under sheet or cover? Yes, okay, then fine. Then comes portable tent. Yesterday, when we were discussing about the certain kind of storage structure, we discussed about. I've shown you a picture with a kind of relocatable warehouses. We can be temporary kind of structures which can be easily fabricated. It was on that it was written UN, United Nations. I told you in relief camps and all, it can this kind of warehouses, temporary warehouses can be erected. So in those places where we doesn't have that a cordon kind of structure and all, then we can go erect a portable tent-like structure, that relocatable warehouses, which can be made airtight, and that can be fumigated. Here we can fumigate wagons, trucks, etc., with that kind of portable tents. This wagons, trucks, etc., can be covered with this portable tent, and then we can fumigate it. That is one kind of fumigation. The third kind is vacuum fumigation. In vacuum fumigation, what not have good penetrating power. Penetrating power is extremely important. So what we will do is we will generate vacuum in that structure, and we will release the fumigant into it. Because of the vacuum present in that structure, the fumigant will penetrate easily and it will distribute uniformly. This is mainly used for fumigants which have low penetrating power, low diffusing property, and uneven distribution. So we generate vacuum so that the fumigant penetrate deep into the layers of grains. So that is vacuum fumigation. It will hasten and improve the penetration, and partial vacuum is created. And another advantage is that duration of exposure can be reduced. Exposure period can be reduced because it will get penetrated quickly. That is one advantage. But aluminum phosphide, which releases the phosphine gas, it cannot be used for vacuum fumigation because under vacuum it explodes. So we usually don't recommend aluminum phosphide under vacuum fumigation. So these are the four different types of fumigation that is normally practiced. Modified atmosphere, which will later, because here modified atmosphere we are not using any toxic gas, so that we will deal later at the end of this class. So we are coming to the end of that introductory part. Now we will move on to individual fumigants. Whenever I am dealing with individual fumigants, one thing is uh, we have methyl bromide was one of the most ideal fumigant which was widely used, but because of its ozone depleting property, its use is restricted. In certain countries it is banned, and so afterwards it was that decision was taken in about 2005 or 7 or so. So after that, there are a lot of fumigants which are developed by several companies in different countries. They considered as an alternative to methyl bromide, but not most of them are not that successful. Some are successful to some extent, but not that successful as methyl bromide. So first we will discuss about a few chemicals which was widely used as fumigants earlier, and later on, after discussing methyl bromide and aluminum phosphate, we will see few chemicals which are evolved recently, which are considered to be an alternative to methyl bromide. So we will see it one by one, each and every fumigant. I have given a huge list. The left side list, mainly the older ones: ethylene dibromide, acrylonitrile, carbon disulfide, carbon tetrachloride, chloropicrin, ethylene dichloride, hydrogen cyanide, methyl bromide, phosphine, etc. And the right side, especially that ECO2 fume, profume, granoside, all of them are recent fumigants which are considered as alternative to methyl bromide. So coming to each and every fumigant one by one. First one is acrylonitrile. Acrylonitrile is possesses most of very high undesirable properties. Once it is highly inflammable. Then we have high cost. It is costly, and it has because of its high inflammability, we will try to mix it with certain other fumigants which are non-inflammable. That I will discuss it later in the next few slides, how we try to reduce the inflammability of explosivity of certain fumigants by mixing with other fumigants, that we will deal later. So acrylonitrile, we can't use it alone. We have to mix with other fumigants to reduce its inflammability. It doesn't affect germination, but it has high density. So a fanning is required. Acrylonitrile is a dense gas, so it won't distribute or penetrate properly. So we need to provide fanning. We need to provide fans to distribute evenly. So it has very high undesirable properties: costly, inflammability, density, and which requires fanning. And it has to be mixed with fumigants to reduce its inflammability. And it doesn't affect germination for seeds we can use, but it is extremely toxic to human beings and as well as plants. So that is one thing that toxic to human beings is common to most of the fumigants. So that is with respect to acrylonitrile, just used earlier but not now. Coming to the next one, carbon disulfide. Carbon disulfide is another fumigant similar to acrylonitrile, which is flammable. So again, we have to mix with the non-flammable fumigant. It is toxic to plants, similar to acrylonitrile, but it doesn't leave any residue. That is one advantage. But it has another disadvantage, that it is soluble in lipids and essential oils. So because of that, carbon disulfide cannot be used for fumigating oil seeds because it gets solubilized in lipid content or oil content of the oil seeds. It affects viability of the grain, so it cannot be used for seeds. But unlike acrylonitrile, it has very good penetrating power. Phytotoxicity, I have described it as toxic to plants. So carbon disulfide also, it has several undesirable properties such as flammability, toxicity to plants, gets solubilized in lipids. It affects viability of the grains. So carbon disulfide is also not that used nowadays. Coming to carbon tetrachloride is still used, but it's mainly used to mix with other fumigants because see the third character, it is non-explosive in nature. So what we normally do is, if we are using acrylonitrile or carbon disulfide, which are inflammable or explosive, we will mix with carbon tetrachloride. Once we mix with carbon tetrachloride, which is non-explosive or non-inflammable, it will reduce the explosivity or inflammability of that fumigants, either acrylonitrile or carbon disulfide. That is how carbon tetrachloride is mainly used, but the toxicity is pretty low. That is one disadvantage. So that's what we normally do. We'll mix with a highly toxic fumigant, which is explosive, and carbon tetrachloride, which is less toxic but non-explosive. So both those characters will blend together and will prepare a fumigant. We will see a few fumigants commercially available mixed with carbon tetrachloride. So it is less toxic. That is an undesirable character, but it has good penetrating power, non-explosive. So it is mixed with fumigants which are explosive in nature. It will not affect the viability of the seeds. So seeds can be fumigated. It doesn't leave any residue. It is toxic to human beings and it has pungent chloroform odor. So that is another advantage of using carbon tetrachloride. Carbon tetrachloride, it is having good penetrating power, non-explosive and pungent chloroform odor. So these characters are the reason why carbon tetrachloride is still used, not alone, not as a single fumigant, because it is not that toxic to insects just like other fumigants, but it is used as a mixture with other fumigants which are explosive in nature and which doesn't have any warning odor. So once you mix with carbon tetrachloride, the that will impart a warning odor to the fumigant which doesn't have any warning odor. So that is with respect to carbon tetrachloride. Next one is chloropicrine. What is chloropicrine? Do you know what is chloropicrine? It's very common. To study this. Tear gas, yes. Chloropicrine is tear gas. It's actually not used as a fumigant. It is can be considered as a fumigant, but toxicity is not that good. But it's normally mixed with methyl bromide. Methyl bromide doesn't have any warning odor. So what we normally do is we mix methyl bromide with chloropicrine to impart a warning sensation. It's not an odor, warning sensation. So if we fumigate a room with methyl bromide, any commercially available methyl bromide contains chloropicrine. If we fumigate a room with methyl bromide, invariably it will be having chloropicrine. If some person enters into the room accidentally, then he will get that burning sensation in the eyes and he will move away. So that is why we are giving a warning odor or warning sensation into fumigants. So chloropicrine is added to fumigants to have warning sensation. Then comes ethylene dibromide. Ethylene dibromide, see, bromine, chlorine, fluorine, etc. These are very heavy molecules. So this is also ethylene dibromide is also heavier than air, so it doesn't penetrate well. So we need blowers. So it's not doesn't have that desirable properties. We need blowers to distribute it uniformly. It has very low penetrating power. It is highly inflammable. So because of its inflammability, we will mix with, see the last part, we will mix with carbon tetrachloride in 1:8 ratio. That means for 1 part ethylene dibromide, we'll add 8 part carbon tetrachloride to reduce its inflammability. It's also corrosive to aluminum, so we can't fumigate anything which is kept in aluminum containers, toxic to human beings. And another disadvantage is it is absorbed by fumigated material. Again, it is an undesirable character. It is available in glass ampoule. You might have seen some injections, some antibiotic injections and all, which is available in glass ampoule. Similar to that, ethylene dibromide is also available. And I used to, when I was studying in PG and PhD, I had an opportunity to see that ethylene dibromide ampoule. But nowadays, I don't have a sample of it to show it to you. So ethylene dibromide also has some undesirable properties. So it has heavier than air, so it doesn't penetrate easily. So we need blowers. It has very high inflammability, corrosive to aluminum, absorbed by the fumigated material. So in order to reduce the inflammability, we'll mix it with carbon tetrachloride in 1:8 ratio. And EDB, ethylene dibromide mixed with carbon dioxide, is called as EDB plus. EDB plus. Okay, that is ethylene dibromide. Then comes ethylene dichloride. Ethylene dichloride is also not that very toxic. Ethylene dichloride is also mixed with carbon tetrachloride in 3:1 ratio to reduce the inflammability, as well as it is provide a warning mode. So ethylene dichloride mixed with carbon dioxide tetrachloride in 3:1 ratio, but it is also having one property of it gets solubilized in fat and it is not very toxic. So it's not that effective as aluminum phosphide or methyl bromide. So that is one disadvantage of EDCT. So not that, though it is registered in our country for fumigating grains, but FC is not at all using it because it is not that toxic to insects. It won't have that effectiveness as with other fumigants such as phosphine. Then comes ethylene oxide. It is a highly inflammable fumigant. It is mainly used for vacuum fumigation. So that is ethylene oxide. I haven't seen anywhere ethylene oxide is used. Then comes next hydrogen cyanide. As you all know, hydrogen cyanide. Cyanides are all extremely toxic, not only to human beings, all organisms. So it is lighter than air. Again, as it is lighter than air, it is having low penetration. So if it is heavier than air, if the fumigant is heavier than air or lighter than air, both will reduce the penetrating power. It is toxic to human beings. It doesn't leave any residue. It can be used in vacuum fumigation. Because of the toxic property of hydrogen cyanide, it is hazardous to the person who is operating it. It is also called a cyanogas, and it may damage moist materials. I don't know how it damage, but literature says that it may damage moist material. So hydrogen cyanide, extremely toxic gas called as cyanogas. So all the operators which is using it should be extremely careful. Mainly used for vacuum fumigation. Because of its lighter nature, it has low penetration. But if you're using it in vacuum fumigation, we can improve the penetration. That's why it is mainly used for vacuum fumigation. But one adverse problem with HCN is it can cause injury to moist material. Then comes the next one, DDVP or dichlorose. I won't be discussing DDVP or dichlorose because it's a banned chemical now. It is still, I just kept a slide because till last year, that means till December 31st, 2020, dichlorose was used because of its fumigant nature. It is an insecticide as well as a fumigant. So because of that, dichlorose was widely used by Food Corporation of India. But since it is banned, it is not at all used now. It doesn't leave any residue in the food commodity. It was mainly used as a prophylactic treatment. It was used to spray on the walls, floors, etc., so that any insect hiding in the cracks and crevices will get killed because of the fumigant property of dichlorose. Then coming to methyl bromide. Methyl bromide, if you see the characters of methyl bromide, it has the characters of almost all the characters of an ideal fumigant. It penetrates very well, quickly and deeply. It has deep penetrating power. One disadvantage is it is corrosive to aluminum, so grains in aluminum containers can't be fumigated. It is non-inflammable, non-explosive. It doesn't get absorbed. we mix with chloromethrin that we have seen earlier, tear gas to have a warning order. One disadvantage is it combines with oil seeds. Oil seeds cannot be fumigated. It is used in quarantine. It is non-phytotoxic, but it is an ozone depleting substance. So, according to Montreal Protocol, the protocol signed by various countries, it is to be phased out by 2015. But what I've learned from certain quarantine organizations is that still India is using methyl bromide because there is not an alternative to methyl bromide in quarantine. In quarantine, if you want to fumigate a plant material, if you are importing, say, a plant, a seedling, or a ornamental plant, there is a chance of a pathogen or an insect gaining entry through the import of that plant material. If you want to fumigate it, most of the fumigants which we have studied till now, they are phytotoxic. They can't be used. And methyl bromide, it is not at all phytotoxic. It is very effective. We can fumigate it. Another thing is that aluminum phosphate is also not phytotoxic. But see, aluminum phosphate, the exposure period is about 5 to 7 days. So 7 days, if you are keeping a seedling, the seedling will dry up. Because if you are fumigating it, we will be fumigating under a complete closed environment. There won't be any sunlight and all. The plant will die. Methyl bromide, 2 to 3 days, fumigation will be over. So that is one key because it penetrates very quickly. So though a few disadvantages are there, for we get to avoid oil seeds, uh, it is corrosive to aluminum. Those things can be avoided, but the major thing with respect disadvantage with respect to methyl bromide is its ozone depleting property. So that's why methyl bromide is not widely used now, but still it is prevalent in quarantine. Okay, I will stop with this phosphine. I will take it up tomorrow. Anything? Anything you want to discuss?